Oh, is it that time already? Time for another episode of Autism in Education, Science and Me. Cool. Welcome back to class, everyone. I hope you're ready to think today, because now it's the time. You know who I am. It's your favorite teacher, Tom Herrera. So, enough with the intro. What monologue is awaiting today? Today on Autism in Education, Science and Me, we have remote instruction. Today's monologue will cover the 10 challenges of teaching remotely. This should be fun and long. We got 6.5 pages ahead of us. So, brace yourself, grab your writing apparatus and stationery. Here comes 10 challenges of remote instruction. Oh boy! Remote instruction. Do I have an opinion about this? I will let you decide if this is a good opinion or a poor opinion. If you are listening to this podcast today, you should be familiar with this term. But if you live under a rock, in a cabin in the woods, in a pineapple under the sea, or are listening to this from the future, let me provide you some context. Remote instruction was the world's answer to the problem, how do we teach our youth during quarantine? SARS-CoV-2, or the coronavirus to the masses, bloomed exponentially in the early 2020s. As all viruses do, the coronavirus spread like wildfire among the planet. To prevent massive casualties, a quarantine was put into place. People from all cultures, jobs, and generations stayed home. Eventually, we reopened, but until that time, there was a specific age group of humans that needed a little help. Students. Quarantine aside, students still needed to get an education. So how do we teach without being in the same physical place as our students? Say it with me now, remote instruction. Teachers all over the globe took to video conferencing platforms, such as Google Meet or Zoom. It was a steep learning curve. We had to learn how to use these platforms so we could do what we get paid for, teach. The two schools I worked at during quarantine used both Zoom and Google Meet for our teaching needs. So, what did teaching remotely actually accomplish? Well, remote instruction allows the students to still get their education, without the risk of being in person with other students. This drastically reduces the chances of spreading disease. No one likes viruses, and we all want to keep safe and stop the spread. Remote instruction is a good alternative to in-person teaching. It allows students to see one another, see their teachers, communicate with both groups, and somewhat socialize. Remote instruction also allowed students to work together on assignments in class. Remote instruction was a safe and easy way to give students a sense of normalcy in a time of abnormality. But it was filled with lots of challenges. Now that our context is out of the way, allow me to discuss 10 challenges teachers faced with remote instruction. I decided to split it up into 3 distinct flavors: educational problems, technological problems, and emotional problems. And considering this podcast also includes autism, if the problem is made worse due to autism, I will let you know. But for the most part, these are 10 challenges all teachers faced, be we neurotypical or atypical. Education first. Challenge number 1, past expectations versus current expectations. What was the number 1 challenge of remote instruction? I would say it was the expectations of virtual instruction. Most schools shut down during February in 2020. After a little break, students hopped on virtually. What were the expectations during this time? At this point in February, students were in school for at least half a year, at least 2 marking periods of work. What should students be expected to do? Not every student has access to the internet or even places where they can work at home. Not every student can make it virtually every day. Do teachers count that against them? No, that's not equitable. My last school went with this scenario. Show up to class if you can, and if you turn in work, it will be graded. This way, it rewards the students that show up, but does not penalize those that do not. Essentially, your grade is on the work you previously completed. My current school, on the other hand, basically gave the students a pass. Show up or do not show up, no penalty. You pass. Regardless of their past grade, they would move on to the next year. I can hear you cringe from here. I believe this was a mistake. Why do I think so? Because they set a precedent. I have many students now who think that they're going to pass like last year, even though we've stated numerous times it is different from last year. But do they listen? No. They seem to have it stuck in their minds that they will pass this year without having to do any of the work. There is no need for any completion of any work. They will pass regardless, so why bother? Very few people, if any, put in work into a hopeless endeavor. Why spend the time and energy when it does not matter? This mindset and decision causes many problems, as you can guess, but leads directly to the next challenge: having students actually show up to class. Challenge number 2, attendance. In my previous point, I discussed that some students expected to just receive credit for no work. After all, if you're going to pass the year anyway, why do any of the work? And if I'm going to just pass, why show up? I noticed 3 patterns my last 2 years on remote instruction. I had students that always attended class, students that partially attended class, and students that never attended class. The latter 2 types were maddening. I would either have students who never attended a single class or attended certain classes for some time. For instance, attending my class for maybe 5 minutes and then logging off to do who knows what. These students seem to think that just by showing up, they could pass the year. But in most cases, you only pass the year by attending class and completing all assignments. 2 things that these students did not even try. I pride myself in being an easy class. You have to try to fail my class. We do a lot of work, but it all adds up. The only way you fail is by not doing anything at all. Which is exactly what these kids did. Some students only attended homeroom and nothing else, as if somehow attending homeroom equals attending and completing student work. Newsflash, that is not how it works. But Tom, how bad was attendance really? Surely you are exaggerating the absences. Was it really that bad? Ooh, let me give you numbers and facts. Last year, over 5 classes, I taught 117 students over 2 days, an A day and a B day. I had 2 classes on A days and 3 classes on B days. How many kids do you think I taught remotely each day? I will wait. Take a guess. If you guessed less than 10, you would be correct. Good job. The attendance was atrocious. On my A days, I consistently had 2 kids the first class, and at most 3 kids. Averaging these numbers yields 2.5 kids that class. The next class, I usually saw 3 students, for a grand total of 5.5 kids on A days. On B days, my first class usually had 2 or 3 kids, for an average of 2.5. The next class had the highest amount of students by far. There were always 6 students that day, some days 7 or 6.5 on average. The last class always had at least 2 students, but occasionally 3, for another 2.5 on average. Our B day grand total is 11.5 kids. Over the week, I averaged 17 kids a week. 17 out of 117, or 15%. Atrocious. But wait, I hear you cry. That was last year. That was when the quarantine was still new. Surely it got better this year. Right? Oh, you sweet summer child. No. This year, I had about 1/4 as many students as last year. About 18 students semester 1, and 14 students semester 2. So, 32 students. Each semester, I had 4 classes a day. My roster for semester 1 included 2 students the first class, 10 students the second class, 3 students the third class, and 3 students the last class. Semester 2's roster included 3 students for class 1, 6 students the second class, 4 students the third class, and one lone student the final class. How many students decided to get an education this year? Take a second guess. Surprisingly, semester 1 had a decent following. The first class usually had 2 students a day, but averaged 1.5. The second class averaged 3 students consistently, and the third class always had 1 student show up. The final class usually had 2, but often had 3. That rounds to 2.5. Basically, every week for semester 1, I averaged 7 children. 7 out of 18, or 39%. Better than last year. Semester 2 was worse than semester 1, but better than last year. Most of the time, the first class had 2 students, but often had 1 for an average of 1.5. My second class was the same, so another 1.5. The third class... Where do I begin with the third class? I can count on my hands how many times I saw students. I would go months without a single student, only to randomly have a child pop in one day, and then never return. I never consistently had students, so I averaged a 0 for this class. I only had 1 student in my final class, but they never showed up all year. Another 0. Semester 2 averaged 3 students each week in semester 2. 3 out of 14. 21%. Here's a recap. I had an average of 15% attendance last year and about 30% attendance rate this year. Attendance during remote instruction sucks. Whether students show up or not, there is no denying the attendance rate was awful. The result? Many students did not pass the year. So far, we only had 2 challenges. But did you notice something? Education really suffers during remote instruction. This is just the beginning. Our next challenge moves onto actual classroom experience. Challenge number 3, time constraint. How long do you think classes should be? Various schools have various lengths of class time. The school I taught at during my internship had 84-minute classes. My first school had 15-minute classes for science and social studies, with 100-minute English and math classes. My last school had 72-minute classes, while my current school has 50-minute classes. So how long should remote classes last? We were only given 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Not a lot of time. It's barely enough time to actually discuss concepts, let alone actually work on assignments. Not to mention the fact that work is best learned through repetition. There are so many activities teachers do in a class that every second counts. Think attendance, note-taking, in-class discussion, student questions on material, student assignments, and teacher-student feedback. Stop and think for a second. How much can you really teach in a half-hour time frame? As always, I will not leave you hanging. I will provide you with an example of a class I have taught both live and virtually. The topic is characteristics of life. What should be involved in that lesson? I would start with probing the students for background information. Ask them what they think characterizes what makes something living. Go around the room. Try to get as many different answers from as many different students as possible. Does not matter if they are correct or incorrect. Just get them to talk. Then you would discuss the actual characteristics. There are 7, in case you were curious. Then go through each characteristic and discuss why they are used to identify living things. Compare and contrast student answers to the actual answers. Do not forget to stop and wait for student comments and questions. All good? Okay. Next would be to provide examples of living things and non-living things, and why they are living or non-living respectively. I usually use several living things: dogs, cats, trees, myself, and some non-living things such as markers, viruses, rocks, and my good friend Pat the Skeleton who helps me teach. Then it is time for student work. They can complete questions, assignments, or whatever you plan on testing their understanding. I have them write a paragraph explaining why several objects are living or non-living. Okay, lesson's done. How long does that take? Longer than 30 minutes. The beginning part can take as long as 10 minutes if you have a class of students who are inquisitive and participate often. Add in another 10 to 15 minutes discussing the characteristics. This time includes the note-taking portion of class and questions students have. We're already 25 minutes in and we just discussed information. Discussion is half the battle. The other half of the battle is turning discussion into understanding. This is when you take a concept and then apply it elsewhere. After learning why a dog is living, you can discuss why a rock is not. That next part can take anywhere from 5 minutes to 10 minutes. Then, when students are comfortable on their own, you can give the students some work to complete that tests exactly what they just learned. There's another 10 minutes at least. By my calculations, this lesson takes at least 40 minutes, more time than allotted by remote instruction. It is very hard to get everything done in a single lesson virtually with limited time. In addition, as a science class, my students perform many labs during their year-long science class. Do you have any idea how hard it is to do a lab virtually? Can you imagine trying to do a lab virtually? I did not even bother trying. It was too much hassle. But that was the main appeal of science classes, and I could not do labs. I think this may have also contributed to the low attendance rate, now that I think about it. But despite that, we educators adapted. We shortened lesson plans, changed assignments, did whatever we could to give the students what they needed to pass. I think I've run out of time on this challenge. There is no more time to talk about time. The next challenge is a challenge of professional appearance. Challenge number 4, professional appearance. Imagine a student and a teacher. You're doing a lot of imagining today. Please keep it up. But imagine a student and a teacher. What do they look like? Teachers often are very business formal with ties, jackets, button-up shirts, or formal dresses. Students may wear a uniform or t-shirts and jeans. Now, think of the video platforms used during remote instruction. All these video platforms have a small area built in where students appear on camera. Now, I do have a bunch of stuff to say about this, but I'm going to get to that when we discuss technical problems. For now, focus on the professional appearance. While I taught, I always taught in the same location, at a desk sitting up with the curtain closed to prevent glare. If I had to move away from my desk, I would turn my camera off. Now, my question is this. Where is an acceptable location for you to teach from? The bathroom, your bed, the couch? Should I be allowed to teach from any of these areas? No, it's not professional. However, I have had students enter my class from these areas. Last year, during my office hours, I was assisting one of my favorite students for her chemistry class. She spent the entire time on her bed. A few times while teaching, she rolled over and spoke to me upside down. I was like, "You comfy?" I am not sure about you, but I think it is a little disrespectful for me to teach you when you are lying down and not focused on learning. Our students knew they were supposed to sit up and be ready to learn, but I still had students learn without a care in the world. It was very vexing. When students were in the classroom, they were expected to sit up, focus, and not put their heads down. Just because we are at home does not mean they could show up in their pajamas to class. I mean, if we teachers cannot do that, should we really let our students? Don't answer that. Don't answer that. I do not want to know your opinions on that. Please just let me vent. Our next challenge deals with a very important part of education. The children. Challenge number 5. Children being children. Hold on, wait. Don't go anywhere. It's not what it sounds like, I swear. When I say children being children, I am talking about the lies and the effort that my students exhibited. Children lie. It's going to come up. But something I heard a lot during remote instruction was, "My camera's not working. I forgot we had class today. I did that assignment already. Mr. Herrera, you're not cool." They all lie. Most of these lies make no sense. They just did not want to show up and had no excuse. However, some of the excuses are legitimate. But what I do not like is when I hear, "Oh, I'll do that assignment. I'm going to do it." I hear that a lot. And the students do not follow through. They say they will do something and then never do it. This makes me rather sad and disappointed. We have bright students who are not doing what they need to do to further their career. Due to time constraints, lots of teachers turn to easy assignments. Assignments so easy that you are guaranteed to pass just by completing assignments. And the students still did not do their work. The students would rather sleep in all day or not do anything. They are lazy. Lazy, 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 lazy. It is very hard to justify passing students if they have no work to show for it. Ever heard the phrase, no shoes, no shirt, no service? Well, no work, no grade, no pass. This problem was only made worse by the fact that certain schools pass students for no reason. Problems from the past come back to bite you in the butt. Okay, this ends the educational segment. Now, we move to technology problems. What is one we can start off with? Alright, internet problems. Challenge number 6, internet availability. There are a slew of problems with the internet. These include losing internet, internet not connecting, not having any locations with internet, not having a hotspot, slow internet speeds, getting kicked out of class meetings, lagging in class meetings, etc., etc. If my primary method of contacting my students is through the glorious internet, and the oh-so-glorious internet does not work, how am I supposed to teach? When you teach through the internet, you are really at the mercy of the internet. And technology and I do not have the best track record. Technology and I do not get along. Technology doesn't like me, and I do not like technology. There is a reason why my career is working with squishy living things. I can at least make squishy living things like me. Just a little. Sometimes. Not all often. Anyway, I have been kicked out of my own class. I have had students kicked out of class. I have had times where I lagged in class or had students lag in class. Some days I cannot share my screen to teach, or some days I can't even open up a new tab without having my computer lag so much. The internet is great and all, but when you have to teach using it as a reliable navigator, it's not easy. You ever try to teach a 30-minute lesson with lagging issues? Have you ever tried to answer scientific inquiries where students log out of class unexpectedly? I hope you never do. While attendance and youth are problematic, they are certainly exacerbated by the internet. The internet may have problems, but do you know what else does too? Computers. Challenge number 7, computer problems. Having no internet is problematic. But do you know what is even worse? Having no computer, or having a computer that will not turn on, or having a computer that will not charge, or having a computer that will not let you log into class, or having a computer that will not share your screen. Do I need to continue here? Students need a good computer to attend their classes, and many districts had issues with providing said computers. I had a student that went through the entire year without using a computer for class. She used her phone, but she was one of the good ones. A faulty computer is what many students blamed for their problems. I'm not showing on camera, my computer is broken. I dropped out of class, my computer kicked me off. My mic's not working, my computer is broken. I'm failing your class because I did not do the work, my computer is broken. Granted, some of these could be legit problems. It often goes back to challenge number 5. They get kicked out and they do not return. Or there's a problem and they do not bother fixing it. Oops! Got kicked out. I don't need to go back. Free day! Woo! The computer aspect of the instruction is just as important as the internet and their attendance. Students really should not be at fault if they do not have internet or have a computer to work on. What they are at fault for is not telling anyone or doing anything about it. They are at fault for just coasting through the year with minimum effort. Most schools provided students with their own computers, but various districts are limited in computer availability. And some districts may not be the best at repairing said computers. There are a plethora of problems schools faced during the pandemic, but they tried their best. I cannot say the same for my students. Do you remember earlier in Challenge 4 where I said I had more to say? No, me either. Was trying to see if you were paying attention. The next challenge has to do with the challenge of having no cameras on during lessons. Challenge number 8. Camera? Question mark? At this point in the episode, I am on page 5 of the script, and on the 8th challenge, and only now I am actually going to bring in autism as a part of Autism Education Science and Math. I mentioned before that I have had students come into class without turning their cameras on. This bugs me immensely. There are 2 main reasons why I hate teaching or tutoring when my students do not have their camera on. Reason A, I cannot see them. Reason B, I cannot read their expression. Reason A comes first alphabetically, so I'm going to start there. Why is it important for a teacher to be able to see their student? Why is it important that students are seen? Well, you can learn a lot from a person by watching them. You can hold them accountable. In the class, how does a teacher know if they are droning on too much? Or how do they know if they lost the student's interest? Or how do they know when they need to change activities to keep the students motivated? You watch them. At a single glance, a teacher can tell if a student is unfocused, bored, tired, or needs more help. At a single glance, a teacher can determine if a change in pace will result in the desired outcome. At a single glance, you can see where people are on a particular topic. Do you see how important visual cues are? All these behaviors can be monitored just by watching the students. How are you supposed to do the same thing when you cannot even see your students? You cannot. It is virtually impossible to determine if you are droning on too much. In 30-minute classes, mind you, from voice alone. It is essentially improbable to determine if you lost a student's interest. When my students' cameras are off, I have no idea if they are even listening to me. Half of my entire teaching time is explaining a few concepts and then, do you understand that? Questions? Are you still with me? When the cameras are off, I cannot even tell if my student is present. My only cue that there is someone there is the late reply. Yes, no, maybe. I could be teaching my entire lesson to a wall, and I would be none the wiser. Of course, I have not even touched the bonding part yet. Students and teachers spend a long time together. Hours upon days upon days. You tend to form a bond with your students as time progresses. And this has helped along the visual aspect. My students know what I look like and how I act. On the other hand, I have no idea what my students look like. I changed schools. I went to a new school during the fall and ended up teaching 32 new faces. I only know what 5 of those kids look like. And those are the ones who showed up. The other 27, I would not recognize them if I passed them on the street. Have you ever tried to bond with a still image before? I have a much easier time bonding with someone when I know what they look like. And that is because I really gather so much information just by watching people. Which brings me to reason B. I cannot read their expression. I am autistic. I am book smart. I am not street smart. I am not the best at determining how people feel or how they react to certain situations. I cannot gauge correctly if what I said hit the way I wanted it to hit. I do not know when there is an appropriate time to stop a conversation, or an appropriate time to start a conversation. So how do I navigate these treacherous waters? I watch the people that surround me. I watch their faces, their body language, anything and everything. You really can learn so much from a simple short glance. My mom has said at some point that she really feels watched when she eats with me. Mostly because I am trying to read her to see what is going to happen next. Why is this important? Well, teaching is a social endeavor. You interact with others. You need to know what motivates a student. What can keep them going? What can you use to get their interest? What you can do to help them learn better. While some of this information can be gleaned at the start of the year, in everyday contact, you can learn what works and what does not. You can adapt your behaviors based off of the behaviors you see. If you see them at all, that is. Again, do you see why seeing is so vital to teaching? If I cannot see, then I cannot be the most effective teacher I can be. Which brings me to my final two problems with remote instruction. We covered educational problems, a few technological problems, so now let us talk about emotional problems. Challenge number 9, laziness. Today I don't feel like doing anything. Do-do-do-do-do-do. I just wanna lay in my bed. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Don't feel like picking up my phone, so leave a message at the tone. 'Cause today I swear I'm not doing anything. Nothing at all. Ooh, 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 nothing at all. Ooh, 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 nothing at all. Bruno Mars really encapsulated the mindset of my students. Kids are lazy. I was lazy when I was a kid too. But the difference was that I always did my work. These kids do not seem to have that difference. Believe it or not, there is a difference between live laziness and remote laziness. The first major difference is the time frame. Normal classes have an excess of 50-minute classes. As stated before, the shortest classes I have taught live were 50 minutes, and the longest was 84 minutes. In class, you can be lazy and not work for minutes at a time and still have time to do the work. As discussed in Challenge 3, the flow of a class allows time for students to work. While it is not the best idea, students can laze around during the work time, provided they have the work ethic and time management to utilize the remaining class time. This difference does not occur during remote instruction. Why? Because there is only 30 minutes of class time. Once my class is over, I do not have any control in what my students do during their spare time. Ideally, after class is over, or near the end of their final classes, you should do your work. This is what you should do whether you are doing live instruction or remote instruction. But most of the students just check out after their final class. They attend class, do some work in class if there is time allowed, and then stop from there. Of course, as I am not present, I do not know what my students' home life is like. They may have work to do, they may have to watch their siblings, or they may have family troubles. All these reasons could explain why they do not do any work at all. Based off of this, it is a little unfair to say that all students are lazy. You truly cannot blame them based on these circumstances. What you can blame them for is not contacting their teachers. When I was a wee lad in high school, so about 2 inches shorter than I am now, we rarely contacted our teachers. If we needed to talk to our teachers, we did so before class, during class, or after class. My teachers did not give out their emails. Or if they did, we never contacted them. Now, as a teacher myself, I find my students do contact me through email. They will ask for help on assignments or to tell me they are leaving early or something. This did not really happen when I was in high school. It is a weird change of pace. It is kind of weird how it went from little to no contact with teachers to being able to contact teachers whenever. My students can contact me 3 ways. Through my school email, through the Google Classroom page, and through an app called Remind Me. Students have the opportunity to contact me if they need to. But the truth of the matter is they do not contact me. How long does it take to send a quick email or message, "Mr. Herrera, I'm going to be out today"? I think that does not take too long. A few seconds at most. And that brings me to my final challenge. Challenge number 10. Tired of remote instruction. I heard this so often from my students. I'm tired of remote instruction. Oh yeah? Well, I'm tired of teaching remotely. But here we are. Somehow, and I do not understand this logic, because they are tired of remote instruction, that means they cannot do the work. I really heard that so often. My automatic response was, we're all tired, but we have to do it anyway. One student tried telling me that it was different from me as a teacher. I got paid for being remote, the students did not. My job is to teach. Their job is to learn. It does not matter if they get paid to attend class or not. There are so many jobs out there that require at least a high school diploma. I have said so many times to my students, the skills you learn in high school will follow you for the rest of your life. You learn so much during high school. You learn how to interact, how to work, and plenty of other important characteristics and qualities to survive in the real world. A few of my students wanted to go to trade school instead of going to college. I tell them that that is a perfectly wonderful future ahead of them. But to get into trade school, you need to pass high school first. Not only that, if you routinely not show up, do not do the work, and never contact your employer or your fellow employees, you will not get hired. They tell me that it will be different when they get paid for it. I disagree. Old habits die hard. They spend the last year and a half slacking off. That is very hard to break. They will have a rude awakening if they do not wake up now and fix their behaviors before it's too late. Lastly, I disagree with the notion that because I'm getting paid to do remote instruction, it is different. It is not. Here's why. I do not get paid enough to do remote instruction. Teachers do not earn as much as they should, and we certainly do not make enough to make up for remote instruction. I am not a teacher for the money. Being paid is a perk. I am a teacher because I want to help raise the next generation. I want to get students interested in learning. I want to enable kids to learn how to think critically. I want to give kids the skills to adapt to the real world and to follow logic and reasoning. I am a teacher because I want to teach people the science I learned. I am tired of remote instruction. I am tired of logging onto a screen where no kids show up. I am tired of logging onto my computer and not being able to grade student work because there is no work to grade. I am tired of spending my days attached to my computer where I spend hours doing nothing. I am a teacher. I want to teach. I want to be in the classroom. I want to interact with the students. I am an extrovert. I like being in the same vicinity as others. I enjoy interactions outside of my computer. I am autistic. While I interact with my students, I need to see them to make sure I can teach them effectively. Remote instruction makes it very hard to teach. From the problems of expectations, student attendance, lesson time constraints, where the students are physically seen in class, the children being young people, the availability of the internet, computer problems, camera malfunctions, student laziness and tiredness. Remote instruction was not an easy time to be a teacher. We all struggled, from the neurotypical teachers to the atypical teachers. But we all had one thing in common. We all wanted to make a difference in the world. Even something as drastically dangerous as the pandemic of 2020 was not enough to stop us. We remained, we survived, and we taught. Next time on Autism in Education, Science and Me, we are going back to some research where I will begin discussing Asperger's syndrome. Look forward to it. Thanks for listening. This video was different from my usual format. This topic was less research and more just a long rant. These are all my personal opinions. I am sure some of my challenges resonated with some teachers, but it also could be that they disagree with all these points. My point for this episode was to just discuss what I saw and felt. I welcome any comments or feedback on this episode. Share with your friends, engage with others, and just talk about it. Safely, of course. I feel obligated to say, stay socially distant, wear your masks, and get vaccinated. Let us do what we can to bring students back to the classroom. Until then, I will still be here, waiting in limbo, until I record again. See you next class.